Okay, so today we're going to be learning about the gladiators presented by Michelle Murillo. And oh, okay. For the introduction, we're going to be talking about ancient Rome, the Colosseum, whether or not the gladiators fought to the death, and how the gladiator games was a form of entertainment. For historical context, Rome had controlled large parts of Europe, North Africa, the Middle East. Roman society valued strength, military power, discipline, and entertainment. And since Roman emperors ruled over millions of people, the gladiator games were made to keep these citizens complacent, but also the gladiator games was like an embodiment of their values, which was strength, like I had said, military power, discipline, and was a form of entertainment. What were gladiators? So gladiators were trained fighters who battled in arenas for public entertainment. Many gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals. Some people volunteered to become gladiators because they could earn money, fame, and popularity. Gladiators trained in special schools that taught them how to be good fighters, and they practiced combat skills in these schools, and they followed strict diets and exercise routines. Even though gladiator fights were dangerous, not every fight ended in death because gladiators were expensive to train and owners did not want to lose them easily. And so I'm going to use this video to further explain what gladiators were.
I know who you are. Lucius Verus Aurelius.
Okay, so the reason that I showed this video is because it's a more recent movie that has came out and it was a very popular movie, but um it was basically about gladiators in Roman society. Although it does show what we think of as gladiators, it's not a very good source to explain what gladiators are. For instance, in these movies, they show gladiators dying in whenever they go to fight, and the fights are mainly take place in the Colosseum, but not all gladiator fights were in the Colosseum. Okay, so gladiators were an exciting form of entertainment because there wasn't much to do in Roman society. For instance, now in modern day society, like we have TVs, we have phones, we have other ways to get entertainment, but they didn't. So gladiator games, plays, music, it was their only form of entertainment. And the games also upholded values like power, strength, and skill. And a popular expression that was used was bred in circuses. So basically, it's this ideology that if we keep our citizens content, which means like giving people food and entertainment to keep them distracted and satisfied, so they're not paying attention to other aspects within their society that might be going wrong. So it was like a form of a distraction. So the picture that I have on the right shows gladiators in a much more in like a more in a better source because this is a real depiction of gladiators. And if we compare and contrast how these gladiators look like from the movie clip that we just watched, um, they don't look the same. For instance, they have helmets, and in the movie, they don't have helmets. And in the movie, not all gladiators are given shields. And in this depiction, the gladiator is given a shield and they're more covered on their arms. In the movie, they did not show coverings on the arms. Well, certain gladiators weren't given coverings on the arms. Okay, further, we're going to talk about the Colosseum. So, the gladiators are connected to the Colosseum in Rome. The Colosseum was built in 70 to 80 CE, and it could hold around 50,000 spectators. People from different social classes attended events there. Gladiators, gladiator battles, and animal hunts and public spectacles all took place inside this arena. The Colosseum became a symbol of Roman power and entertainment. Although some gladiator games were held in the Colosseum, not all gladiator games were held in the Colosseum. Um, why did why they ended? Um, Over time, gladiator games became less popular since Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, and many people began to see the violence as cruel and no longer as a form of entertainment. The games were also expensive to organize, and eventually the gladiator battles disappeared as Roman society changed. And the connection to the real world, Spartacus and Conor McGregor. Okay, so the reason why I chose Spartacus and Conor McGregor as my connection to the real world is because Spartacus was one of the most famous gladiators and rebels in Roman society, in Roman history. Conor McGregor is one of the most famous and entertainment-focused MMA fighters today. They both became larger than life public figures, and they both drew huge crowds and media attention. Both had reputations for confidence, aggression, and showmanship. And in all reality, there isn't an exact comparison to gladiator games to our modern day society. So the reason I chose Conor McGregor is because he is an MMA fighter and they do fight for public entertainment. And I drew that connection to Spartacus, a gladiator. And before I do the activity, are there any questions that I can answer?
Did the gladiators only fight in the Colosseum?
No. Some gladiator games were held in the Colosseum, but not all of them. For example, when gladiators were being sold off, they would do trainings, and these trainings were also kind of like to help show like their owners if they like made a good deal when buying the gladiator, but also like different they were in different games. So the Coliseum would be more as what we would know as today, like the Olympics. It was just more only the top gladiators would fight there, and there was other arenas where other gladiators would also fight.
And also were these fights like how the boxing matches are today, where they served food and other forms of entertainment?
Yeah, in Roman society, they did serve food, but like nowadays, when we serve food in different sports, like you can buy like Coke and popcorn, and like even in some places you can buy like hot dogs and burgers. But back then, they didn't have a lot of food to really give out, so they gave out like loaves of bread for their food.
And also, why did they like the fights? Was it just because they liked watching the violence?
Um, Back then, I think they did appreciate the violence because it was something that was entertaining for them, but they didn't really have other forms of entertainment. But then once Christianity spread, they didn't like the gladiator games anymore because they just saw it for what it was, which was violence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, now we're